Hey everybody, we are back with another episode of Can't Stop Snapping. Thanks again for tuning in. We are joined by a great guest today, and we will dive soon into the conversation and the questions that we've answered. Just wanted to go over a couple of things, a couple of news items. One, there is a new location in the game, the Bifrost. As you would think, it has something to do with movement. Essentially, if Bifrost is a location on the board after turn 4, all cards at each location will shift one location to the right. If you're in the most right location, then obviously you don't move. And once a location is filled, obviously cards can no longer continue moving into that location if there's more cards that would have moved into that location. So definitely an interesting location. You kind of have to play around it once it flips off, because the first few turns of the game, you kind of need to play accordingly. One location to the left of where you want your cards to actually show up. Obviously, this plays into the move archetype really well, because you kind of get some free movement on a lot of your cards. So we've seen a lot of people playing with that. But overall, another interesting location to add to the rotation. With that all being said, we still don't have any changes to Nexus events. We will have some conversations about Nexus events in today's episode, but I am still expecting, nothing to change on that front for probably another 2 to 3 weeks following their normal patch schedule. So we will stay tuned and obviously be covering that. With that all being said, once again, thank you for tuning in. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at can't_stop_snap. And without further ado, let's jump into today's episode. Hey everybody, we are back with another episode of Can't Stop Snapping. We are here today with a great guest host by popular demand. A lot of you have been asking me, when is he going to be on? When is he going to be on? We are joined today by RidiculousHat. He is here to help cover his thoughts on the game. He's been sharing some of his thoughts on Twitter and other places, but we are here to dive deep into his thoughts as well as the questions that we have sourced from you, the listeners, on Twitter, Reddit, Discord, Facebook, etc. So, RidiculousHat, thank you for being here.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. Gosh, you make me sound so important with people are demanding. It's like, no, they're just used to me talking so much about my opinions. They're like, hey, why don't you do it on this new game? And here we are. Yeah. So thank you so much for the audience.
Yeah, no problem. No, I mean, to be fair, you're the only one that's been requested so far. I mean, everybody else has loved the guests we've had, but you've been the one that's been asked for again and again. So before we dive into the bulk of what we want to talk about, which is the questions and your thoughts about the game, just kind of want to give you a second. I'm assuming a lot of our listeners know who you are. I've listened to maybe some of your other work, but just tell us about your background with the card game scene in general. How did you get into Marvel Snap? What do you think sets it apart, et cetera? Just kind of a brief intro of how you got to this point where, you're enjoying Marvel Snap, you're playing Marvel Snap, et cetera.
So my background is, gosh, do I have to call myself an influencer? It makes me sound so pretentious. I talk a lot on the internet. I have tweeted a lot about many things. I'm a card gamer for a very, very long time. I played Magic the Gathering at summer camp and then I call it a quasi-pro in the high school and college, where I qualified to do a few pro tours, did a couple events, had a couple nice finishes, but never made top 8 of any major events. I top 8 at a Grand Prix one time, long time ago in a former life. And then got a job at a major movie theater company, had to work nights and weekends. Can't really do Magic tournaments on nights and weekends. So was kind of out of card games for a bit. And, I tried Magic Online, but it's a terrible program. Then Hearthstone came out, and it's available on mobile as well. So I'm like, I'm going to play some of this. I'm going to tweet at some people I used to play Magic with about Hearthstone. That landed for some reason. People like the tweets. So then they said, hey, do you want to tweet for like 2 hours and call it a podcast? And so there was a show that invited me on, Coin Concede. It was the first Hearthstone podcast I joined in 2017. Since then, I have joined 2 additional podcasts. I run a Hearthstone league. I also I have to admit, I have a problem. I run spreadsheets for communities. So I run multiple leaderboard spreadsheets in the Hades community as well, because that's another great video game. Not a card game, but super great game. I just like making spreadsheets and helping people and doing all that stuff. So when it came time for Marvel Snap, I got invited to try out the beta in the first wave in late May. I got the download when I was at my brother's wedding out west, and we had a bunch of downtime, but I didn't have a desktop computer, but I did have my phone. I killed my battery like twice a day, just snapping, snapping all day. So that was the first season. I got up to like 95, ranked 95, but I never got over 100. Finally got to Infinite this season, right after the most recent Nerf patch. I just redid my Sarah Miracle deck and got there in a couple days because I happen to have a lot of Pool 3 cards that worked out. I'm having a lot of fun with the game. I live in New York City. I commute to work via train. For a good portion that I have internet connectivity. And let me tell you, portrait mode is a revelation. If this was a landscape mode game, I would play it so much less. But portrait mode, fast games, it's so great. And I really like the strategic depth, but it's not, the games aren't laborious. They don't take too long. 6, maybe 7 turns.
Yeah. No, I totally get that. I mean, I work from home and, just downtime between meetings and, just kind of moving around my space, my workspace. It's just nice I'm like, I'm just going to play a quick game, right? Now, that being said, sometimes that quick one game turns into a quick 4 or 5 games, but try to keep it to a reasonable level. But yeah, thanks for sharing that. So you obviously been playing, like you said, since May. So you've kind of had the full beta experience, if you will. You've kind of seen this from day one till now. So you've experienced all of the patches, the buffs, the nerfs, the good, the bad, the ugly. So you're going to bring all that context to a lot of these questions we're going to be talking about. So you've done me the favor of helping to organize a lot of these questions. You and me both sourced these from a variety of different listeners and locations, and we've got them organized into a couple categories. We have some design questions, gameplay questions. Probably the one we got the most questions about was kind of collection, monetization, and systems. So we tried to kind of surmise some of those questions into a couple of general questions that covered a lot of the questions that were coming in, and then we'll finish off with some art, sound, and just some other fun questions that came in. So with that being said, we're going to dive right into the design questions. So this first one comes from Kazargar, I think is how the name is said.
I always think of them as Kazargar, but it might be Kazar. I'm not sure. I don't know. It's a made-up word.
Point. Yeah, Kazargar. They ask, what do you think of the core game and available design space? Do you think this game can sustain what it has for 5 years, 10 years? What do you view as its potential biggest limiting factor?
Okay, so first caveat that I'm going to give, I'm glad this is the first question, because everyone loves to be an armchair game designer. And I'm not going to say I don't love it. I love it on an occasion. It's called content creation. The reality is, I play these games. I think about how they probably are made. I don't work in the industry. What I'm going to try and do this episode is I'm going to try and focus on my feelings and thoughts around the game, and I'm going to try to avoid to lean too much into giving the devs solutions, because they know how to make games. I don't know how to make games. What I do know is I know how to play games, and I know how I feel when playing games. With that being said, when we get these armchair design questions, I'm absolutely gonna shoot my shot out there, whatever. But the game designers, any game designer, they have gotten to where they've gotten to because they love making games and because they've done it a lot. Because anyone that tries to get into this industry casually, it's kind of terrible quality of life-wise. They work way more and make way less money than just any other tech thing. So they just do it because they like making games. So I'm going to trust generally what they do and that there's a reason for it that I don't necessarily understand. But look at a question like this. What do I think of the game's available design space? I'm going to give my completely uninformed opinion because that's what podcasters do. So, I don't know. The limiting factor is probably like getting approval from Marvel for the character designs, I would guess.
Yeah, I think that I don't know so much about the potential biggest limiting factor. I mean, maybe a couple small things come to my mind. I don't know if there's one big thing. As far as kind of going to the first part of the question, the core gameplay, the available design space. We'll get into this in some other questions and my thoughts, but I think they have a lot of potential. I think they've created something unique where, kind of a real shift from a lot of card games out there, right? Where we're going from large decks, 30, 40, 50, 60 cards, right? To 12 cards, very quick matches, and where it feels like every card can have an impact in some kind of archetype or strategy. Now, I know people maybe complain a little bit, I opened this really crappy card in Pool 3 and I'm so disappointed. But the reality is from what we've seen is that as you just get more and more cards, every card has its place, right? In a couple of different deck builds, couple different ideas, couple different strategies. So with that that feeling that I've got, I think they have a lot of space. I think every card they're adding, has some unique place in the structure of decks somewhere. So I think they can run with this for a long time. I think adding cards at a regular pace, each one of those cards can then be shuffled into kind of existing decks, can create new ideas, etc. So I think they have some bandwidth to grow and to kind of run with this model for a while.
Yeah, I think so too. My biggest concerns are actually more in the systems and content pipeline section of how quickly are they going to put cards into the ecosystem? How much will they matter? Do they have a long-term plan for rotation without plans for like expansion releases? I'm trying not to think of this as a card game because I don't think that Snap is a card game as we typically think of it. It's dangerously close to like an RPG gacha game like a Fire Emblem Heroes or whatever. You don't pick the number of heroes that are in your deck. Each one is unique. You've got to collect them. You don't really have agency over which one you get, except for loot boxes, which we'll get into later. Don't worry, listener. I know you're shouting at your radio. We'll get into it later. But this is not a deck builder. Like, you're not tweaking mana curves or whatever, or bases. You have a rough energy curve that you're trying to hit maybe sometimes, but you're drawing 75% of your deck every game, and each card is unique and individual. So this isn't a card game in terms of we're going to get an expansion where they drop like 50 new characters on us all at once and we buy them all at once. It's not going to be like that. So I don't really know what the long-term future looks like. I do agree with you that anything can be useful. I'm playing a deck in Infinite right now with Rockslide in it.
Yeah.
Shout out to, I think it's iCowcow's list of Magic Destroy, but there is a Rockslide in that deck, and it's doing all right. Sometimes my opponents will just instantly retreat on 6, and that means I know they've drawn Rock.
Yeah. Yeah, because at that point, you've kind of thrown those in when their deck's maybe a little whittled down. So the second question here, you kind of alluded to it, and it's kind of made me think of this. So the second question from the same person, Kazarger, says, do you think we will ever get to the point where we will need some sort of standard wild card limitation or rotation of cards? And I personally don't think we really will. You kind of talked about that a little bit, but by the nature of us kind of getting cards at a slower pace and kind of spread out and each card having impact, but the fact that we're only like in maybe 150 card range right now, and with all the cards we know that have been data mined, we're maybe in the low 200s. I really don't see like us getting to 1,000 cards, anytime soon or anything like that, or even just the high hundreds where there would really be a need to like ban or rotate out cards. Now, that being said, there may be competitive modes where certain cards are banned, etc. People do their own tournaments, etc. That, things like that. But I personally don't think we're going to see kind of the same form of rotation that we've seen in some other card games.
Yeah, I mean, you could do multiple formats pretty easily. There's always a point. If Snap is around for 5 years, there's going to be a point where you get magicked 5 years from now, and you say, what if there was a format where we only play with the new cards and I don't get magicked anymore? I don't have to worry about a surprise turn 7. Now, there's going to be a point where you want some kind of different, fresh experience. We're talking about a very different stage in Snap's lifestyle. This has been in closed invite-only beta and region lockout for 2 months maximum. For a lot of people, less than that. This is way, way, way into the future. But if they do, 2 to 4 cards a month, something like that, if they did, let's say 3 cards a month for 5 years, that's 50, 60, it's 180 cards, right? They could easily do a format that says, let's just do the last 2 years of new cards. It's 120 cards. That's all you get to play with right now in like a separate mode. They could do that. They don't have to eliminate the original cards. They can still leave like classic or legacy, whatever you want to call it, and also have some kind of new rotation where you only play with the new stuff. They don't have to do that. But there's a point where if the game is successful enough that it has a long-term player base, it will kind of be a natural desire of the players to play with newer stuff and to maybe experience something without the older stuff and then be able to go back to it. I'm never going to say this is not a thing. I don't know what Snap's future looks like. Clearly, the second dinner does. But I'd be curious to see if we get to the point where this sort of thing makes sense.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I mean, I think obviously with the beta and what a lot of people sometimes I think don't understand is that they're focused on the core gameplay right now. A lot of people are like, well, where are the game modes and when are we going to get a ton of new game modes, etc. Like those will come with time, right? And when there's more cards out, and they can kind of turn their focus to that. But so yeah, I could see something like that in the long term. But will we get that, in the next 3 months, next 6 months? I would doubt it. But they're hoping to be here for the long term, is what they've said, obviously.
Yeah,
And
this,
so
this is
I
years
think,
down the road. This is not a
yeah,
right now or even right now-ish. A lot of things about the game would have to change for us to talk about what would a format look like that doesn't include the cards that we just got. Because the game it's negative release. It is not yet released. It is a beta early access product.
Hey everybody, I wanted to jump in here for just a second to tell you about Anchor. Anchor is a tool that I am using to create this podcast and distribute it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and various other podcasting platforms. Anchor is an app you can download for free on the App Store and use to record, edit, add sound effects, etc., and distribute your podcast. I chose to use it because it was very simple to get up and going quickly, and it was free to use. If you have a podcast idea that you've been, throwing around in your mind and you'd like to get out there, make sure to download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started and create your podcast today.
So that thought of it being a beta, that kind of leads also into this next question. This is from Tiago Taparelli. They ask, what would you like for their Nerf buff approach to be? Example, few and far between or more frequently, etc. I just want to give my thoughts on this. Just as you're saying, I think one thing to reiterate to everybody, right? As we're in a beta, right? They're really trying to get this ready for a global release, and we don't know everything they're trying to have ready for that, right? Like, what are the metrics they're trying to meet? What are all the features they're trying to have, etc. But I do know they probably want to have a global release where the game is as balanced as they can with the initial kind of cards they'll have at launch, right? That being said, we've seen, we had a patch, and then I think 2 or 3 weeks later we had another patch, and both of those saw nerfs and buffs to cards. I think we're going to continue to see kind of probably in every 3 to 4 weeks, or maybe even every 2 to 4 weeks. As we're in the beta, I think they're just going to be making tweaks here and there, just as the game kind of goes along, just trying to get it right, if you will. But then I don't know. I guess once it's in a global release and they've kind of spent all that time really testing and getting it just tightened up and balanced, what they've got thus far, I think we'll probably see tuning of cards less frequently, just by nature of them. Okay, releasing 2-3 cards a month, maybe, right? That those cards may require other cards need to be buffed or nerfed, right? Because of the interactions they have. But it's not like, okay, this one card came out and now 20 cards need changes, right?
Yeah, this is really hard to say. I think that when you're in a beta, we should expect more frequent changes. I was playing, before the most recent run of nerfs, I was playing Sarah Miracle, which included 6 cards that got changed, right? 2 mana Strong Guy, 3 mana GR, 10 Power Chavez. I forget what else was in there total, but you think about just what we're playing with right now, and we're dealing with tuning mistakes of the video game because they've never had this in public before. They've never had it released and tested with like an actual player base. And looking back at it, a 2-9, probably too good. Probably too good.
Yeah.
Right. So I want them to change that sort of thing where every single deck started to homogenize because you just play the clear tuning outliers and they fix them. I understand that the discussion about, well, these are the pool 1 cards. You want to make sure people have something good. I want to make sure people don't have one deck that's good. I want to make sure they feel like they have some choice and also they don't feel obligated to play a certain way. And Strong Guy just rewarded you for playing Marvel Snap the way Marvel Snap wanted to be played. It was everywhere. So I like what they've done so far, but I don't really know if I want my stuff to break this fast with P3 decks, because if I wait like weeks to get Mystique, and then they nerf her, I'm not going to feel very good. That's going to be kind of crappy. And we're talking about decks already. I don't own the card Death, so I can't play Death Wave. So if you nerf Death, then Deathwave as a deck ceases to exist. Do you want to delete entire archetypes this early on in the game? I don't think that makes a lot of sense, even though if something is really crazy and a super broken balance outlier, which I don't think anything is right now, you want to fix it. But you don't want to take away decks from players when they're already complaining that it's really hard to get. So I would expect that their nerf cadence is going to be a little slower. I like more buffs than nerfs, just to make half the cards that are sitting in my collection be a little bit more useful. And then after that, I don't think they need to hit cards that hard or that often, but we also don't know how stale the game's going to get and how quickly they're going to infuse with new cards and if Nexus events are going to get turned to something sustainable.
Yeah, and we'll dive into that more, but yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that I think it'll be kind of a middle approach, or at least that's what I like to see, right? Where, they obviously address things when they need to and make changes when they need to, but I'd love to not see them, switching it up every 3 weeks, right? Completely changing things around, which I don't think they will. Continuing on here, this one is probably a quick one. Nico asks, what are your thoughts on the 12 unique cards per deck format coming from Hearthstone? And I'll turn that one over to you. I know Hearthstone. I've played a little bit, but I'm definitely not an expert in things Hearthstone. So what are your thoughts on that?
So just in general card games, I'll just come from a general card game background. In card games where you have 30 or 60 cards or whatever, I don't build decks, I net deck, right? And Snap doesn't have as many resources for that right now. Most of the decks that you'll find are on Twitter or Discord's buried somewhere in various channels. There's no central database because the game is 2 months old and most people can't play it yet. But it feels pretty different because every card feels distinct. You draw 75% of your cards in a normal game, because 9 out of the 12 by the time they hit turn 6. Yep. If you are playing Magic, then you draw 10 of them. If you draw cards somehow, you can. There have been multiple times today where I haven't drawn for my turn because I'm out of cards in my deck. I drew them all. So they all feel impactful, but the deck building stress is a lot lower because I don't have to worry about exact tuning of how many of this card do I run. I feel a lot more encouraged to experiment because it's just one card here or there, but the impact can be massive. And you pretty quickly tell when you draw a new card. Well, it happens fast because you're really likely to draw it the first game you queue up. And as soon as you play it, it's such a compressed window of turns that did this card matter or did it not? Unless like a tech card and you're waiting for, if you tech an Enchantress, then don't face anything that's ongoing, then you're not going to get it. But maybe if that happens a few games in a row, maybe I don't really need this. It feels pretty geared towards what the game is doing. I don't know. How do you feel about this, Michael?
Yeah, no, I have to agree with you. I mean, I think even more so once they add a kind of a mode that doesn't have cubes, you're not trying to rank up, if you will, right? Just kind of a free play mode, no risk. I mean, I think the experimentation is really going to pop off for everybody, right? I think it already is. It's already friendly to that, like you say.
We call this Dumpster Infinite. That is where people experiment, is Dumpster Infinite. At rank 101, you're going to see some stuff.
Yeah. No, and I think that I've enjoyed experimenting, right? And I'm at a point right now where I'm like, I've got like 3 decks I kind of rotate through, right? And then occasionally, right, either I get a new card or I just kind of feel like, okay, this deck is not winning as much as I like, right? And so, like you're saying, it's not like, okay, I need to look at, do I have a second or a third of this card, right? And kind of trying to figure out the probabilities of all that. It's really like, maybe I'll just take out one card, put one other card in, right? Let's see how that feels. Play 5 matches, 10 matches, and just see, okay, is this doing better or worse? I think it's really friendly for that. And I think that's really exciting. Where, I've played other games, Legends of Runeterra, et cetera. And like you said, it's kind of like I'd go find deck lists and things like that. But then, I don't know, I just felt like it was more stressful to figure out exactly how to tweak things, right? Where this just feels more fun. I feel like I can be more creative and just kind of test things out, see how combinations work. Sometimes I'm going off of lists with Marvel Snap decks that I find. Other times I just say, you know what? I just want to make a really obnoxious deck. Let's put Dr. X in there. Let's put, things that are going to really lock down my opponent. Hobgoblin, right? And I'll just kind of mess around with stuff. So, yeah, I think it's unique, and I think it has the potential to have, a nice longevity because there's so many different combinations. And like we've already said, the cards are each so impactful by themselves and each has a place that you really can kind of create all these great unique combinations.
Yeah, I mean, every element of the Snap experience, or at least every element, is intended to be low friction. When you go into a deck building screen in Runeterra, you got to pick your champions, you got to pick your regions, they have different restrictions, you got to read the 12 new keywords that they introduced in the most recent set, whatever. And it takes time and energy and focus. And Snap, I just like drag out Okoye and Dragon Scarlet Witch, and I've changed a 12th of my deck without really even thinking about it. So it's everything about Snap is just, oh, I'll jump in a quick game. Oh, I'll just change one card. Oh, I'll just do this. Oh, I'll just do that. Oh, it's 2 a.m. What happened? My battery's dead.
No, I'm gonna kill the longevity of my battery because I've been charging it so much.
Yep.
Totally get that. Well, jumping down here, I'd love to, a lot of you guys sending questions. We're not going to have time to do every single one. So I'd love to jump into our gameplay related questions. I mean, we've obviously been touching on some aspects of that. But Leaf asks, I plan to get into Marvel Snap whenever it has a wider US release. What is the one pointer you'd give to new players? Anything you wish you had known when starting? I'm going to turn this over to you first. You've got a couple of notes in here about your thoughts.
Okay. So the first one, I'm going to instigate on your podcast. I'm going to start a fight and I don't have to deal with it next week. Don't play Quicksilver Domino. Just play cards that do things. When I first started, Quicksilver I think was my most upgraded card because I thought that it was in addition to your opening hand. That is not what happens. It replaces a card. Play a card that does something. But I think the most important thing that I still struggle with to this day, there is an instinct to stay in a game and see what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Retreat. Retreat is cheat. Just, if you want to keep your cubes, don't let the other person take them. And then as a corollary, by turn 4, if you're not going to retreat, you should snap. And if you don't feel comfortable snapping, you should probably retreat.
Oh yes, I mean, what to add or what to say to this? I fall victim to this myself. I know. I mean, people have said to me, your goal should be never lose more than 1 cube, right? So in essence, that's what's on the table at risk. And if somebody snaps, obviously that doubles to 2, and then when you get to the end of the game, whatever you're at doubles again. And so it's like, if you're going to lose cubes, lose 1, right? And I try to do that, and that has helped me rank up faster, kind of having that mentality. But there's still those times where it's just like, well, if they don't draw this, and if I draw this next turn, oh man, I just
you just want to know.
Start to wonder.
You want to know what's going to happen.
Yeah, and then a lot of the times, what happens, right? They've snapped. I decide to stay in, then 2 cubes are on the line, and then either I then retreat on turn 5 or something, right? And then I've lost 2 cubes, or then I fall into the trap the next turn, right? Oh, well, if this happens next turn, or if it plays out this way, and then I lose 4 cubes, right? Or what have you. So, and then immediately after, it's just kind of that feeling of, I knew I should have retreated. Why did I stay in?
Dude,
right?
Before the nerf, I kept losing to Chavez, and I finally developed a rule like, if I'm going to lose to Chavez, just leave the game right now. And before I press go on turn 6, if I'm going to lose to a guaranteed draw, something is wrong with my approach. So I'm even going to go simpler than you because I think I made the other mistake of once I snapped, I see a game through the end. My advice to new players, here it is. Don't get 8 cubed. Leaving on 1 is ideal, but don't get 8 cubed. If you snap and then retreat for 4, it's still better than getting 8 cubed. Twice as good. So just don't get 8'd. That's it. Yep.
Yeah. Great advice. I couldn't agree more. I think that's really the key to really ranking up, right? Is just, and it's very different than other card games where you kind of have the structure of the cubes and the doubling of the cubes and stuff like that. So
it warps my brain when I'm playing other games. After I play a lot of Snap, I concede super early when I'm slightly behind, and then I realize after, oh, nope, there's no cubes in this game. I lost the same amount that I would for any other game. Should have probably played that one out.
Yep, 100%. So definitely another paradigm shift from the card games we're used to. Up next, we have a question from MadK17. They asked, some pointers on deck building would be good. What does an average looking curve look like? How many 1, 2, 3 drops should I run?
Now, this is a fascinating question. Where have you landed on this?
Well, for me, it's the D word, which is depends. You know,
The magic answer.
I think how to word this. It's probably, maybe this is a frustrating answer, but I think there are decks where you play really heavy on the 1, 2, 3 spectrum, right? And there's other decks where maybe you have, half your decks is 4 or 5 cards, right? And then sometimes there's decks where half your deck is 6 draws and you're trying to discard them and resurrect them with Ghost Rider or pull them out with, of course, now I'm going to forget her name.
Jubilee.
Jubilee. I was like, she's an X-Men. Yes, with Jubilee, right? And so it really depends on what archetype you're playing, what strategy. I would say, so that's my first thought. Second thought is, generally, I will have anywhere from 2 to 3 1-drops, just kind of in my average deck. I said if I had to like average out my decks, I'd say I normally have 3 1-drops. But that's not like, I'm not like trying to play to that rule, if that makes sense. It's just some of my decks have a lot of 1-drops. Some of them have 1 or 2. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's not helpful for listeners. Maybe that's not what you want to hear, but I think it really it depends, which I think is a good thing with this game. I think it's a game where you're not having to, every deck has to play into a certain kind of curve with having a certain amount of drops at each cost.
Yeah. I have an accurate answer and I have a more involved answer. The accurate answer is the game's been out for 2 months. Nobody has any idea. The involved answer that I'm going to give immediately after discrediting my own authority and legitimacy here, because that's, again, what podcasters do. You have to think about what the perfect curve of your deck is going to be, and if you want to win more, you usually play on curve, but if you want to cube more, if you want to cube up more, which you do, you play for the last turn, the last 2-ish. Yep. I would have said play till turn 6, until this last month's meta. Turn 7 is usually the end of the game now. So play to the last turn. That's usually where you want to have your power spike, because the whole goal of the game is to be unpredictable and powerful. So generally, I recommend thinking about the perfect curve of your deck. What are the sequence for turns 4, 5, and 6? 1, 2, and 3 will fill in those turns, and some of those cards can be pretty powerful, but since we're naturally playing towards the late game anyways, playing for burst power, then your low-cost cards, I think, are often tech cards or scaling cards. You're looking at Scorpion, Okoye, Scarlet Witch is a good one. Nakia, obviously, because she's just a big pile of numbers. But the best one in the game is Nightcrawler, because Nightcrawler wins you Sanctum Sanctorum when the other person does not have Nightcrawler. That's why Nightcrawler is played, not because it's a big number, but it's because it's flexible and generally useful and helps you do whatever it is you want to do. So I wouldn't go too overboard on 1, 2, 3s, but you can play lower curve. Just, you'll probably cube up less if you generally power spike earlier in the game. It's why Professor X is a 2-cube card, right? Sandman's a 2-cube card. But if you want to get 8 cubes, you play Magic, you play Sarah, you play Hela, I guess, if you're lucky. The cube gain is more biased towards late game power spikes.
No, funny enough, I have Hela and I've not had much success thus far. So, but I agree with what you're saying.
I mean, when it works, it's amazing. Yeah. It's just, that's 1 out of every 10 games.
Yep. But I totally get what you're saying, and yeah, I think you really are playing for the end game as if you're trying to rank up, right? You're trying to, take out your opponent. Make it feel like as you're maybe turn 4 or 5 that you're behind, right? That's what in an ideal situation, that's how you want to look, right? And then you want to be able to kind of pull out all the stops there on turns 5, 6, 7, whatever it is, right? To turn the tide. So interesting question. And I think, as you kind of alluded with your first answer, as time goes on, I think we'll learn more about this and we'll maybe see if there are patterns that are more successful with, how many cost drops, etc.
Yes.
Up next, we have a question from Lil Robitussin. They ask, I'm wondering what decks you've been playing after the most recent patch. Have you been playing meta decks or making your own? So I'll give my answer here. My most played deck right now has been a Death Wave deck. And what I play with them.
You're one of them.
I'm one of those too. Obviously, I play with Wave and Death. hence the name. But I've got Chavez in there. I've got um, Doctor Doom, and I've got Magneto.
Okay. Interesting. Why
So
Magneto?
one, because I just unlocked him like yesterday, and I just
Good
wanted to
answer.
play with
Good
him a bunch
answer.
and split him. So I got enough boosters between yesterday and today to split him. But it's worked out for me, right? I mean, obviously the strategy is, I destroy enough cards that I can throw down wave on turn 5, which makes death cost 0 on turn 6, and then I can throw down another 6 cost card. So I'm usually throwing death with either, just depending on which one's the best for me. Um, Chavez is there in case I don't draw some of the other ones, right? Uh, Magneto is there if I need to shift power of my opponent to another place on the board to help me win. And then obviously Doctor Doom's there to fill up the board if that makes the most sense. So it kind of leaves me multiple options, right? It's kind of the thought. But that obviously does fill up a third of my deck with, high cost cards, right? But I've had some decent success with it. I may need to pull one of those cards out, right? What I replaced was Jubilee after they made the change because I was running it with Jubilee before, just pulling down that Chavez every turn 4, right? And now that that's less consistent, half the time I end up pulling down like Carnage and destroying
Ugh.
all my cards at that location, and it's not ideal.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I've been playing. And then other than that, I've been playing some Cerebro 2 power, and some kind of swarm discard stuff.
Those are solid. Yeah, I really want to get. I'm dying for Mystique. I'm dying for Mystique so bad. She's in like all the cool things that I want to do. I don't have Wong either, so I got to figure out how to make that happen. As for me, I guess a Sarah main because that was the first really busted pool 3 card that I opened, and I happened to get a lot of the good stuff. I got Ghost Rider pretty early. And I got Mojo pretty early, so I was able to and Hellcow. So I was able to build a pretty powerful Sarah deck right before the nerfs. Afterwards, I took out Sif GR, I took out Chavez, I took out Strong Guy, and I just added in a bunch of stuff that seemed kind of busted when it was 1 mana off. Because you think about how Sarah works, she's basically a Psylocke for every 2 mana card you're planning on playing next turn. Because my typical turn 6 before the nerfs was 2-drop, 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 and Ghost Rider. So that's, 11 mana worth of cards? That's 5 Psylocks. Pretty powerful. So I tried to find as many good 2s and 3s I could find. So Mysterio, really, really great with Bishop. If you don't know how he works, I don't really either. He's a funky card, but he does trigger Bishop 3 times, and each token carries Nakia buffs. So he was really great. Maximus was fine. He's big. And then I just threw in a bunch of other cards that seemed to make sense. But now I am on, I think it is iCowcow's latest list of Magic Destroy, because Magic is a cheaty card. Feels super unfair. And I want to be the person doing the unfair things. So it's supposed to have, it's a Sarah Magic deck. It's supposed to have Mystique, so you can go turn 5 Sarah, turn 6 Magic Mystique, turn 7 your entire hand. I can't do that, but it's still good enough to turn 7 Killmonger Shang-Chi. That wins a lot of games. So I've been doing a lot of that. And then otherwise, I'll just load in whatever decks I can find that I can build. I've tried out various move decks. I gotta get that Chapter 4 done. Haven't played any Thor decks yet, because I don't own Jane Foster, and I'm not planning on owning Jane Foster, so we'll see if I can find a Thor deck without her.
Yeah. That being said, I appreciate you sharing your decks you're playing. That kind of leads into our next section, if you will. That last comment you alluded to. You don't plan on owning Jane Foster, I'm there with you. So our next section, as I said, would be collection, monetization, and systems. So a lot of you sending questions. We definitely had the most questions here by far, and we tried to kind of sum them up into the overall questions that people were asking at a high level, just to try to cover all the topics here. But before we dive into kind of Jane Foster and all of that, we'll start off with the first question, which is, what do you think of the collection system? How would you change it? So you and me haven't talked about. I mean, we talked about it a little bit, a week ago when the patch came out. But what are your overall impressions about the collection system as a whole? Just how they've kind of laid it out, as what their plan and how it works, and what would you change, if anything, about it?
Okay. So, caveat, disclaimer, I'm a player. So, what I want is all the cards right now. Michael, would you like all the cards right now?
Hey, I would not complain about having all the cards
Yeah.
right now.
But that is a packaged product that you sell one time at a board game store in 1996. It's not where we are right now. If you want to make a live service game as product, you can't do that, even though that's the thing that I want. So, I understand why they aren't just giving me all the cards right now. I imagine the game designers want people to have all the cards for their game because they had fun making them, but they want the game to last for years as opposed to being burned through all the content right now and then be done. It's a different world we live in. So, most of my answers are going to be biased towards I want to skip the song and dance and get to the cards. The number one thing about the collection system, I am sure you have had this opinion on your show before. I am sure you have thought this opinion. Some way for me to get the card that I want. I work in customer service in my day job. The place where human beings get crazy is the place between what I want and what I can have. We see this in the official Discord when patches drop and people want something and can't get it. We see it in the real world. We see it everywhere. So when I open a card and I wish it was Mystique and it is Arrow, I'm not happy about the Arrow. I wish the collection system would change the most at that exact moment. When I open a card and I get what I want, I am happy about the changes. The new 1500 plus changes are great. For those of us that have whaled out in the past, I don't feel like they owe me anything because I knew what I was getting into beforehand. I'm glad they made it better. But I wish there was some way to bypass the song and dance and get the card somehow, or maybe if instead of giving us collector's reserves, just give me wild cards and I can pick the card that I want. If you kept the exact same rate of card gain, but just gave me wild cards and I can pick the card that I want, I would like that a lot more. But, spent a good amount of money on the game. I imagine other people won't. The game will take them longer to get through. That is intentional. It is free to patient, like every other game in this space. It is free if you spend your time instead. I prefer to spend a little bit more money to accelerate the time, but the number one thing that I dislike about the current system, in collection-wise, is agency, and I'm sure you've had people tell you this before and thought this before.
Yeah, I mean, it's been the most common opinion, kind of what you've said. If and there's a lot of suggestions. I mean, you've said, okay, wild tokens, and maybe you get a certain amount of tokens or a certain amount of boosters, and you can cash those in, right? Like, there's all these different ideas of, okay, how does that system look like? How does it change? People have said, okay, maybe you open up a mystery card or a cache or whatever, and you're presented with 3 cards that you haven't unlocked, and you get to pick one, and the other 2 go back into the random pool, right? And then eventually they'll pop up again.
Yeah, make them all have different keywords, right? One can be a move card, one can be a destroy card. Like you can do stuff like that. Sure, why not?
Yeah. So there's been lots of suggestions like that. Obviously, that going back to the developer's mindset, at least the way I've interpreted what they've said, they want kind of that feeling of like uniqueness, of like, okay, my collection is different than everybody else's collection currently. Like, I've unlocked some of the same cards as you, but not all the same cards, right? Like, you have Sarah, I don't have Sarah, but I probably have cards you don't have, right? I have death, you don't have death, right? So kind of that feeling of like, we get to try out different things, which I don't think it is the worst idea in the world. Like, I get in essence what they're going for, but I think what the culture of card games has, has pushed people to expect, right? Again, we've talked about these paradigm shifts between other games and this game, is that cards come out, you get those cards, and then you play with those cards, right? Where this game is, okay, eventually you'll have all the cards, but that's going to take a while, and you're going to get them at a different pace, a different order, so you're kind of forced into trying different things, right? I think there's frustration with that, but also I think it's unique. I think it's only been a couple of months. And so I've had moments where I felt really bad, like you've said, right? Where I'm like, man, this feels really disappointing. I opened this card that, like, yeah, it may be good once I unlock 3 other cards, but when will that be, right? Or now with the new collector's cache, I'll open it up and it'll have boosters. That feels kind of bad.
Yeah.
But then there's other times where it's like, wow, since the change, like I got 2 cards, 2 caches in a row, and it was Hell Cow, and then it was like Doctor Doom or something, right? It was like, wow, those are both cards I wanted, right? This feels great. Like, this is a great system. I'm super excited, right? So it definitely is kind of that hot, cold, right? Kind of flips back and forth for me. And I think that's kind of how everybody is. So I think time will tell. And once there's more systems for the game modes, potentially other ways to unlock cards, etc. There's so much I could say. I think we'll see how it really goes long term, I guess, with the collection system. But I think there's good and I think there's bad.
Yep. I mean, and there's pretty clearly the bad. We call that this next question Nexus events. What's up with Nexus events? How would you fix them? Will the backlash affect the long-term success of the game? So you've talked about this as well, and everyone in every Marvel Snap universe since last week has only been talking about this because it was a big deal, right? It was a big deal. It shook the faith in Second Dinner. I think that's fair to say, right?
Yep.
So, okay, right now, next event. I'm gonna have a bold take. Are you ready? Are you sitting down? Too much money.
I'm ready.
Too much money. I said it.
Bold statement.
Yes. Also, exclusive cards that require too much money, unpleasant. Not a fan. I like either make the exclusivity window smaller, make another way to get it, or make them cost less, like something. But I understand they have to run a business. I don't know how the business runs. The real thing that I want to address here first is this company evil? Did they lie? I don't think they did. I think they made a bunch of mistakes because it's their first product and it's in beta. And it sucked. It's unpleasant. But in order to think that this was precisely calculated, despite the fact that the backlash here was so strong that every bit of influencer marketing that they'd done resulted in every influencer they engaged with dropping the game and making videos about how predatory it is, you would have to assume they were evil and devious in planning out this massive plan to swindle us out of money and too stupid to do the math to realize we would notice. I don't think that's what happens. I don't think that they are both evil and stupid. I think that they made a mistake, a bunch of mistakes here, and now they came out the next day and said, hey, we made a bunch of huge mistakes and we're going to try and fix them. It is possible that their business plan doesn't work for this game as calculated because it's expensive to make a Marvel game and to get the license, and they might not make all that money back at the rate they want to, and they might have tried to charge too much, and they might need to fix that. They definitely need to fix that. It's possible that this was just a miscalculation of the math. I have no idea. The backlash has already affected the game because it's in beta, and all of the big names have denounced it in a major, major way. I hope they get some of that back because the game is fun and the people that I've talked to seem like normal people and not evil people. With that being said, they cost too much and exclusive cards suck. So I hope they figure that out and fix it so they don't have to have those things, but they still have to find a way for this to be a loot box sync that some people want to engage with. I think that's really tough. If I knew that, I would run a games company. I have no clue what they should do. I just know the current feelings around them. I don't blame any players for being upset. I don't blame anyone for losing some faith and trust in the company, and I'm going to hold off on giving them money. I'm probably going to buy the Battle Pass because I am a weak-willed human being. But I'm not going to spend any more money on gold for credits. I don't feel a need to do that anyway. It sucked. It was a crappy week. I'm curious to see how they handle it. And, costing less money would be a start, but if that means that their company shuts down in 2 years, I'd rather they not do that. But if they keep the price high, it's not going to work anyways. So they kind of have to go back to the drawing board, and I'm not going to speak on their behalf and what would work because I have no idea.
No, 100%. I mean, something I would love to, if I could be a fly on the wall at Second Dinner, I would love to see, I would just be curious to see the spending on the game, right? If they had a little chart that shows, okay, people are buying gold, buying credits, yada, yada, Nexus events launch. Maybe there's a spike in purchasing for 1 hour when that launched, and then I'd love to just see what that chart has looked like in the last week since then, right? Just because I'm assuming it's many players have said I will not just not engage with the Nexus events. They've said I will not buy any more. I will not spend any more money on the game. Now I'm like you. I'm not going to spend any money outside of the Battle Pass. I feel like the Battle Pass. Yes, maybe it should be $5. Maybe it should be $7. There's been some discussion about that. It's $10. I feel okay with the $10 for what I'm getting out of that Battle Pass, Season Pass. But, it sounds like most people are not going to spend any money outside of that, or some people aren't even going to do that until changes are made, right? So I think this is probably already hurting their bottom line and kind of what they were anticipating based off of spending thus far in the beta. So I'd be really interested to just see that data, see that. Obviously, I can't, but I personally think that they're going to come out with changes. I think they're going to try to make this right. I think they're going to try to fix the system. Now, I hope that, and that's what I think. They could still get it wrong. They could still, change it to a way that still alienates players. We don't know. Like you say, I'm not a developer. I don't know exactly what they're going to say, but or what they're going to say or do. But I hope and I think that they're going to try to make this right, and they're going to try to, have these systems work in a way that people still enjoy the game, still like the game, and feel like it's fair, and they can choose to engage with those or not. So that's my hope and my thought, but only time will tell.
Yeah, listen, they made mistakes before, they could make mistakes again, but I don't believe that they are intentionally trying to screw people, and if they are, it's certainly not working, so,
Yeah. Well, yeah, that was one of the biggest pieces, and I'm interested to see. I assume we're going to get a patch in the next, if they're following the same cadence and kind of, sometimes they say little things about timeline. They don't try to give too specific. They've said, probably 3 to 4 weeks, right, from when we got the last patch is when I assume we get another patch. So that's maybe another 2 to 3 weeks. So time will tell, and we'll obviously cover that as we get there. So going kind of into our next section, as we kind of turn there, we just have a couple other kind of fun questions that came in here that we just wanted to answer and cover. So Big Sewer 33 asked also, what is Hat's favorite card and why is it Thanos?
Okay, I have to explain this.
I feel like only you can answer
This is a Hearthstone universe meme. I've been in a lot of podcasts. I do a lot of podcasts. Every time I guest in a new podcast, they posted a GIF of Thanos with the Infinity Gauntlet, another stone that I'm collecting podcast Infinity Stones. I have promised my wife that I would not start a Snap podcast. She made me make eye contact while I promised her, because this would have been the third game that I started a podcast, my 5th total podcast. It's too many. So I promise, honey, I'm not starting Snap podcast. But Thanos is cool. But my favorite card, Sarah Best Girl. She's the one for me.
Yeah. Oh,
and
man.
my wife.
I really want.
She's also best.
I really want to get Sarah, but yes, no, but Thanos. I am excited for the day we can actually get Thanos, just because I don't know if he's any good, and I don't think people are trying to do the math, but I just want to try. I just want to experience it. So excited for when that eventually he's actually really playable. Up next, we have a question from Matt Chalker. He's been a guest host on the show here previously. He asks, which variant do you think has the most ridiculous hat in the game?
This has an objectively true answer. It's Big Helmet Professor X. It's just the helmet. Have you seen the helmet? It's so big.
Yes, it's like, honestly, it's one of my favorite kind of more chibi or just like cartoonish art in the game. It's just hilarious, and Magneto just looking like he's gonna give him a hug. It's pretty great.
Yeah, it's so goofy. One might call it ridiculous.
One might even say that. Up next, another question from Matt Chalker. Could you relay a moment in the game which either made you chuckle to yourself or audibly gasp a little bit?
So Knight of Valir. You remember that hot location when every minion got +5 power when every unit did?
Yes.
The first time I got full Shanked, I was like, what just happened? They cleared the entire lane. I instantly lost the game in 8 cubes. And then I went and I edited my deck and I put Shang in for a few days. And then I got my cubes back.
Yeah.
It was intense. What about you? Do you have like a particular snap memory that stands out in your brain?
Yeah, I experienced the same thing. Definitely, that was a feels bad. But for me, before I understood Death Wave and how it worked, right?
Yeah.
I did not understand that. So Death starts as a 9-cost card, and the ability reads that for every card you destroy, the cost decreases by 1. Well, when you play Wave, it puts the cost of all your cards in your hand at 4. So then Death gets set to 4, but if you've destroyed one card, then the cost becomes 3. And then if you destroy 2 cards, it becomes 2, right? So you can, if you've destroyed at least 4 cards in the game or your opponent, then their cost becomes 4. So when people first started getting Wave and kind of getting Death and doing this, I just, I'd be like, okay, it's turn 6, right? And I'm like, okay, even if they lay down Chavez, like I'm good. And then all of a sudden they would throw down Death and Chavez, and I was like, the game's broken. It's a bug. It's a glitch. I was like, I don't understand. I don't understand how they're playing 2 cards, right? And then you'd have the situation where Titan would be a location which lowers the cost of 6 cost cards by 1. So then
Yeah.
it happened to me once or twice too, where Death and 2 6 cost cards got all played down on turn 3, and I was just like, what? Like, I don't understand how this is possible.
I mean, you saw it all the time in the official Discord. It would go in bug reports. Yeah, Jubilee always seems to pull Chavez. Not a bug.
Yeah. And so I was just like, how does this keep happening to me? And like, I would kind of forget about it. And it was, when people were still early in pool 3. So like, not everybody still not everybody has Death, but less people had Death. And so I would only see it occasionally. And then it wasn't until I got Death, and then I kind of looked at Death decks more. I was like, oh, this makes so much more sense. So yeah, that was an interesting learning experience for me. So we've got a couple more questions here. We've got Andrew is Living asks, what's the experience like loving a game and not making content for it? I think that one's directed at you.
It is. It's weird, but I am still... The siren call of content has called to me. I have offered my consulting services to podcasts. I have looked over a couple articles, helped some people set up Discords. I can't help myself. Somebody stop me. But otherwise, in terms of just jamming the game, well, I talk about it a little bit in my other podcasts, my Hearthstone shows, because all my other Hearthstone friends are playing it. But it's kind of nice not having to worry about booking a weekly guest. I mean, you're dealing with that now. Logistics are hard.
Yeah. Yep. No, it's been tricky, and I mean, I've let the listeners know on Twitter. I'm in the last 3 weeks of my master's program. We're finishing our basement. I have 2 kids. I have a full-time job, and I'm starting a new job in 6 weeks. Anyway, my life right now is kind of crazy. So I'm normally recording these late at night, but yeah. No, I've enjoyed doing it, and I've enjoyed getting to connect with great creators like you and others. It's been fun to kind of create those partnerships, create those relationships. We've got 2 very important questions. I just want to close out with, and I think these are going to be just really important for the listeners to hear your answers to. So, what's your favorite sushi, and why is it California roll?
Okay. I am insulted by this question. It is not a California roll. I'm not, I will eat a California roll if it is given to me. I will never order one. But the sushi that I find myself seeking out the most is unagi. I'm a big eel fan. Eel fan. There are a lot of good sushis out there. I'm an equal opportunity sushi employer. But unagi is the one that I always seek out. Are you a sushi fan?
I am that one in my friend group. I'll eat sushi if it's offered to me. It's shared with me, it's given to me. But I'm that guy. It's like we go to a sushi restaurant. All the friends are like sushi connoisseurs. They get the all you can eat. They try all the different kinds, and I get like the tempura and kind of like more of the fried vegetables, chicken, steak, whatever else is there, fried noodle, right? Like all those other things, I tend to go for more than I go for the sushi. So I'm
fried delicious teriyaki chicken. What will you do? I think that sounds delightful.
Yeah. But my wife's a big fan of sushi, so we have to balance that out. And then the final question here from Adam, I should say Nap Dynamite asked that last question. And this final question is, Adam Noodleman asks, is a hot dog in a bun a sandwich or taco?
I've talked about this on a lot of different shows. I need to get your take first, Michael. I need to get your take first.
Well, I mean, the bun is connected generally at the bottom, right? So it's not 2 separate pieces of bread. And by that law, I would say it's not a sandwich. It's more like a gyro or a taco. Yeah.
I'm on team taco. It's defined more by the condiments, and you just say like, I'm getting a taco, I'm getting a hot dog, that sort of thing. Sandwich has a lot more fluidity into what the inner ingredients are, and just in terms of construction. And in terms of how many of them I can eat in one go, I think it's a lot closer to a taco than it is to a sandwich. Now, the correct answer here is, can I have one? That is what I want to know. But if I had to pick one, I'm on Team Taco.
Yeah. Oh man, we live close to Costco. I don't know if you're a Costco fan, but
Ooh,
$1.50 hot dog and a soda. I mean,
that combo is a
my wife
national
asks where I
treasure.
want to go out to eat, and I say Costco. So,
Good answer.
yeah. Well, listeners, thank you for joining us. We've covered a lot of different topics, a lot of different thoughts today. Appreciate you sticking with us and sending in these questions. It's been a lot of fun to look through the questions that came in. Again, apologize if we weren't able to get to all of the questions specifically, but thank you for sending them in. Ridiculous Hat, I just want to give you a chance. You've obviously alluded to the other work you do, the other podcasts that you work on. I'd just love to give you a minute to kind of talk about the other content you're putting out, how people can follow you, how they can consume the content you're putting out, and how they can best support you.
So, how you can support me? If you're listening to this episode, subscribe to it right now. Pause the episode. Or if you're driving, wait until you park. Don't do this while you're driving. Subscribe to this podcast, Can't Stop Snapping. Do it right now. I want you to do that. That's the best thing that you can do for me. Otherwise, you can find the hub of my content over at twitter.com/RidiculousHat. That's where I put my air quotes content. You can't see the air quotes, so I hope you can hear them. But also, I'm on 3 Hearthstone podcasts. Going to see The Angry Chicken and Vicious Syndicate. And I'm in a bunch of Snap Discords and a bunch of other Discords. I talk about video games on the internet and make spreadsheets for them. So if you're engaging with any of that stuff, you'll probably find me.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for being on the show. We hope to have you back again at some time. Listeners, as always, thank you for listening. I appreciate you, sticking with us as we've had a slightly slower release of episodes with me being so busy. Appreciate you sticking with us. Make sure to let us know your thoughts about the discussion we've had on Twitter. Tag us both at RidiculousHat and at can't_stop_snap. And we'll see you in the next episode.
Can't Stop Snapping is a podcast written, produced, recorded, and hosted by Michael Thurman. Thanks for listening.